If it's happening in professional wrestling, we're breaking it down. The matches, the moments, the rumors, and yes, even the hot takes. This is Pro Wrestling Focus. No nonsense, no wasted motion, just pure wrestling talk. Now here's your host, Cody Springer.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Pro Wrestling Focus, and on today's show, doing my review of WWE Money in the Bank 2025. And it was a pretty interesting show that we got on Saturday. We had the return of R-Truth, or R-Truth Ron Killings, as he's being referred to now. I'm not sure what his exact name is. Are they calling him R-Truth Ron Killings or Ron R-Truth Killings? I don't know, but anyways, he's back in the WWE. He made his presence known during the main event match where he attacked John Cena. I'll be getting into that in a little bit, and plus I'll be talking about the two winners of the Money in the Bank ladder matches and talk about the show overall. So without any further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we'll start off by talking about the women's Money in the Bank ladder match that kicked off the show. The participants were Naomi, Alexa Bliss, Julia, Rhea Ripley, Roxanne Perez, and Stephanie Vaquer. And see, the thing is, it was a solid opening match for the show. It was, but as far as like, it wasn't a good Money in the Bank ladder match. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't that great. I thought that last year's match was a lot better than this one. You know, at least in last year's match, you had, you know, Chelsea Green taking that insane table bump, and then Lyra Valkyria, she got I think she got sunset flipped onto a ladder, and that was a sick spot. A crazy bump that she took. But to be honest, there wasn't really any craziness that really happened in this match, you know. It kind of felt very tame. You know, it just felt like a very tame women's Money in the Bank ladder match. So it was a bit of a letdown considering the talent that was in the ring. I mean, look at this list of talent, man. Naomi has always been consistent, always been good. Alexa Bliss is a great talent. Julia, fantastic. Rhea Ripley, one of the best in the world. Roxanne Perez is amazing, and Stephanie Vaquer is top notch as well. So I don't know what happened here, what went wrong. Maybe it's the inexperience of Julia, Roxanne, and Stephanie, or maybe just, you know, there just wasn't the chemistry there between the women, you know, because, I mean, Rhea, Alexa, Naomi know each other very decently well. You know, Rhea and Alexa haven't faced off at all, really, you know. But, you know, Naomi's familiar with Alexa and Rhea. So, I mean, I don't know what wrong in this match. I can't tell you why this match did not click in the way that I thought it would. Yeah, maybe there's just unfamiliarity with one another, you know, because if you're a wrestler and you've worked with a talent for a while, you know, you kind of know what they're going to do, you know, and the timing's there, you know what they're going to do, you know what moves they do and everything like that. Maybe, but in this case, maybe it was just the unfamiliarity between all of them. I don't know. But I mean, there were some good spots in there. You know, Stephanie did the devil's kiss on Rhea on that ladder that was wedged between the other ladder and the turnbuckle. You know, that was an okay spot. And then the double code red, you know, Alexa and was it Roxanne? Yeah, they hit a double code red onto both the ladders that were, you know, connected between the turnbuckles and the ladder that was in the middle of the ring. And that just didn't hit the way that they thought it would. You know, it just wasn't that like crazy to me. But that's just my opinion. But all in all, it was an okay women's Money in the Bank ladder match. I wouldn't say it was great or amazing in any way, but you know, it wasn't too terrible in my opinion. I wouldn't even call it a bad match. It just wasn't great. You know what I mean? But yeah, Naomi is your women's Money in the Bank ladder match winner. She now holds the briefcase. They can cash in for the champion of her choosing for up to 1 year. And I correctly predicted that Naomi was going to win. You know, I mean, a lot of people would have probably liked to see Julia, Roxanne, or Stephanie get it, but you know, they're all going to go on to do great things. You know, this is just the start of their run on the main roster. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the response for Naomi winning the Money in the Bank has been pretty positive online. From what I've seen on X, you know, a lot of people are digging the decision as long as she cashes in successfully. So, and I think that is going to happen. I do think that Naomi is going to successfully cash in the Money in the Bank contract on Tiffany Stratton at some point. But she also could cash in on Io Sky. You know, I'm not discounting the possibility, but I think it's more likely that she is going to cash in that Money in the Bank contract on Tiffany Stratton, because I think eventually we're going to be headed for some kind of big triple threat match for the title involving Naomi, Bianca Belair, and Jade Cargill. You know, I think that is going to be the direction, you know, in the coming months and weeks ahead. But yeah, I'll have to give this match a 3 out of 5 rating. Like I said, pretty tame, nothing too crazy, but this match overall just didn't really click in the way that I hoped it would. But again, I just think it might have been the unfamiliarity with the women in that match. You know, not saying, you know, I'm not blaming anybody. You know, I just want to make that clear. You know, but yeah, it could have been a number of different factors at play. But, you know, it got some decent time. You know, it was 25 minutes and 15 seconds. That's pretty solid for, you know, timing for this match. But, yeah, like I said, you know, there was some stuff that happened that I could have done without. But in the end, not terrible, but also not great either. But Naomi wins the women's Money in the Bank ladder match, and she will be probably putting caution tape on that briefcase here pretty soon. So, you know, so yeah, stay tuned for SmackDown to see how she customizes her Money in the Bank briefcase, because you know they're going to do that. You know, I even pointed that out during my prediction show that she was probably going to do that. You know, because, you know, just do the whole branding, merchandising thing, and how they might even sell a replica briefcase with a caution tape on it. You know, with WWE Shop, and people will buy it because, you know, it's WWE. But yeah, but Naomi is now Ms. Money in the Bank. Our next match was added on virtually at the last second, really. It was for the Intercontinental Championship. We had Dominic Mysterio defending the title against Octagon Jr. from AAA. WWE had that Worlds Collide show earlier in the day. It was NXT and AAA, and Dominic and Octagon Jr. had some issues during that show because Dom was there mostly to shit on, AAA and Lucha Libre, because that's the world that his dad came from, his deadbeat dad, Rey Mysterio. Dom, he got involved physically with Octagon Jr. and Dom, I guess he had the power to make matches all of a sudden. Because he told Octagon Jr., I'll see you at Money in the Bank, and I'll be putting my title on the line. Okay. So these two had a match. It went 4 minutes and 55 seconds, so not a very long match. Octagon Jr., he showed some flashy moves in this match, and he got the crowd, going for a couple minutes there. And I just think this was just a match to kind of showcase a guy from AAA to the WWE audience. So we probably are going to be seeing a lot more crossover with AAA talent and WWE. So that way the WWE fans can get used to seeing these people from AAA. I know that they're thinking about bringing Mr. Iguana to NXT. I did hear that. So we're probably going to be seeing more of him here in the near future. But Dom, he got the win over Octagon Jr. This match wasn't really a part of my prediction show because I didn't know it was going to happen. But we all knew Dominic was going to win. He was going to retain his title. He wouldn't lose his championship all of a sudden in a match with no build-up to a guy from another promotion or another brand, I guess you could say, since AAA is now owned by WWE. But yeah, Liv Morgan, she was working ringside as Dom's valet. As you know, they're an on-screen couple, and Liv, she got involved, and she was the reason why Dom picked up the win over Octagon Jr. But yeah, it was a quick, short little match, to get Dom on the show, and he retained his Intercontinental Championship. As far as a rating, I'll give this a 2.5 out of 5. It had some, decent in-ring action, but it was serviceable, but nothing special. Now that'll bring us to the Women's Intercontinental Championship match. Lyra Valkyria once again defending the title against Becky Lynch, and then there was some stipulations attached to the match. If Becky Lynch lost the match, she would have never been able to challenge for the title again for as long as Lyra Valkyria was champion. Or if Lyra loses, then she would be forced to raise Becky's hand and acknowledge her as the better woman. So, yeah, I felt like this was a good match. It had some good pacing, some good storytelling. But I don't think it was as good as their last match was at Backlash. I felt like the Backlash match was better. But this one, pretty good. It was a pretty good match. Went about 15 minutes, and then Becky was all out, heel. She was an all out heel in this match. She was using the underhanded tactics kind of like how she was at Backlash, but there was a different switch was flipped here. But with Becky being a heel, she was more vicious, more brutal, and then Lyra was pulling out all the stops. She was doing everything she could to put Becky away, but the man held on. And, I like that spot where Becky was trying to do the manhandle slam outside the ring. Lyra countered and hit a quick Nightwing onto the floor. And then we had the count out sequence. And I actually thought like maybe they'd do a count out finish. They would do a double count out and then that would set up their third match, but no, they both got back in the ring at the very last second. So, it built up a drama sequence during the match. And then, and then we get to the end of the match where they were doing roll-ups on each other, kind of like they did the last time, but this time Becky was the one who caught Lyra by surprise as Becky held Lyra's tights to pin her 1, 2, 3 to become the new women's Intercontinental Champion. And then after the match was over, Lyra, she was in disbelief that she lost. And then Becky's like, oh, well, and now it's time for you to make, your end of the deal, bitch. You're supposed to raise my hand. And then Lyra, she didn't want to, but she had to. And she even said it during that interview before the show on YouTube. She said, oh, if I lose, then I'll be a woman of my word and I'll raise the bitch's hand. So that's exactly what she did. She raised Becky's hand, and then Becky made her raise her hand again. And then Becky made her put the title around her waist, and by then Lyra had enough of Becky's bullshit, and then she hit Becky with a German suplex, and then hit her with the Nightwing. Lyra was like, fuck you, you won fair and square, and now you're just being a bitch. So, but yeah, like I said, I felt like their Backlash match was better, but this one was pretty good too. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5 rating. And, and their feud's not over. It's definitely not over. I think there will be another Becky Lynch Lyra Valkyria match 1-on-1 at some point. And yeah, these two just have great chemistry in the ring, and I think they just need to let them go like a full 30 minutes. Like, just tear the house down. Just, yeah, I think it'd be awesome if they let them have a long match like that at some point. Maybe at a WrestleMania, who knows? But all in all, pretty good match. All right, now I'll bring us to the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. We had Seth Rollins, Andrade, El Grande Americano, L.A. Knight, yeah, Penta, and Solo Sikoa. Yeah, this match, I felt like it was better than the women's Money in the Bank ladder match, but still not like a great Money in the Bank ladder match. I mean, there was some, cool moments in here, but nothing too crazy. Like Penta, like he hit a Mexican destroyer onto a ladder at one point during the match, but I felt like the moment didn't hit in the way that they thought it would, Like it's one thing to do a cool move like that, like in the ring, and then it's another thing entirely to do it on a ladder, like it just didn't hit the way that it, they were hoping it would. But during the match, Rollins called in the dogs. It was getting too much for him. Seth was like, "Oh, bring him out. You know, I'm exhausted." So yeah, Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker came out. They started wrecking everyone in sight. You know, basically making it easy as hell for Seth Rollins to you know, win the match. But what they didn't anticipate was the arrival of Jacob Fatu and JC Mateo. You know, they came out to help Solo. And yeah, so they started going at Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker. And yeah, Braun Breaker speared JC Mateo into the barricade. And then Jacob Fatu took out Bronson Reed. And then he was, you know, then he looked at Solo and he's like, "All right, come on, Solo, let's do this. You know, you're going to win. You're going to become Mr. Money in the Bank." So, you know, they get the ladder set up in the ring. Solo starts climbing, and the briefcase is just in reach. And then Jacob grabs a hold of Solo's foot, preventing him from going any further. And Solo's like, "What the fuck? You know, what are you doing?" And then we all knew what Jacob was about to do, because if you remember this past Friday on SmackDown, you know, there was a conversation backstage between Jacob and JC Mateo, or no, between Solo and JC Mateo, my bad. And Solo basically called Jacob stupid, saying that he's all gas and no brains. And Jacob overheard that, and then, you know, I thought to myself, I'm like, "Solo, you stupid motherfucker. You know, you're about to get destroyed here soon." And that is exactly what happened. So, yeah, Jacob, he pulled Solo off that ladder, and he said, "I hate you, Solo." Yeah, there's no love there anymore, and he just wrecked Solo. And then he ended up slamming him through a ladder that was wedged between the ring apron and the barricade. And yeah, so now Jacob has now officially turned babyface, and now the Solo and Jacob feud is now in full swing. You know, I've been talking about it for a few months now, you know, ever since WrestleMania, that this is the direction they were going to head into with Solo and Jacob, and now we're getting it. So yeah, so finally got to that point. So then we get to the end of the match. Seth Rollins, he oversaw all the carnage, what his boys did, and what happened with Jacob and JC Mateo and all them. And Rollins knows this is his chance, so he's climbing up the ladder. But then LA Knight rises up out of the ashes, and he tries to prevent Seth from getting the briefcase. But then Rollins ends up smashing LA Knight's head into the ladder and hits him with the stomp. And then Seth Rollins climbs up the ladder, and he pulls down the Money in the Bank briefcase. And now Seth Rollins is now a 2-time Money in the Bank winner. Oh, man. I like Seth Rollins. I've always been a fan of his. But he did not need to win the Money in the Bank contract. He didn't. No, Seth Rollins absolutely did not need it at all. The correct choice would have been LA Knight. And I really thought this was going to be LA Knight's year. I really thought it was going to be, I was hoping, because, I looked at the betting odds online before I did my prediction show. And, Seth was heavily favored to win. But I don't always go by the betting odds. I go by the story and what they're telling. And, and I knew everything was pointing to Seth. I knew that. I was hoping that WWE would do something different, and give it to LA Knight. But they did not. I was hoping that CM Punk would come out the last minute to screw Seth Rollins, or Sami Zayn, or Roman Reigns even. Roman Reigns to show up and screw Seth Rollins out of the Money in the Bank contract, but no. Seth pulled down the briefcase, and now he is a 2-time Money in the Bank winner. So, but yeah, this was supposed to be LA Knight's time. Because you got to pull the trigger with this guy at some point. If he's going to be a world champion, then you have to do it soon. Because LA Knight, I mean, we love him and everything. He's a great talent, but he's no spring chicken. He's 42 years old, so you have a limited window to where you're going to put a world title on this guy. So it has to happen soon. They have to strike soon with LA Knight because he's still over. He's still very popular with the fans and everything. But it's going to happen soon. They're going to have to put the title on this guy eventually, if it's going to happen. And I'm starting to worry if it's ever going to happen. And it's interesting because 2 years ago, Triple H was asked in a press conference about LA Knight, and he said that, great things come to those who wait. Well, how much longer does LA Knight have to wait before he gets his due? Because come on, man, this guy is over like Rover. He's got the crowd going every time that he's out in that ring. He, and his promo skill is, off the charts. He can talk with the best of them. He can go, word for word with someone like Punk, Rollins, Cena, Orton. LA Knight is one of the best mic workers that this company has. He's so entertaining. He's charismatic. He can go in the ring, and they're not capitalizing on this guy. He spent the last year in the mid-card. He won the United States Championship from Logan Paul and everything, and he, had 2 lackluster runs with the title. He dropped the title to Shinsuke Nakamura. Nakamura did not have a great title reign. He ended up dropping the belt back to LA Knight, and then LA Knight dropped it to Jacob Fatu at WrestleMania. And I was hoping that with LA Knight getting out of the United States title picture, that would lead to him becoming a main event player. But I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. It looks like they might be continuing the feud that's been started with LA Knight and Seth Rollins based off of what happened on Raw last night. So we'll see what happens with LA Knight, but I'm hoping that they, that they strike lightning with him sooner rather than later. But as far as Seth Rollins goes, I understand the story that they're telling with Seth, that he wants control over the entire landscape of the WWE. And that by winning Money in the Bank, he can cash in on the world champion or the WWE champion at any point that he wants. I understand the story they're telling with Seth, that him, Braun Breaker, and Bronson Reed and Paul Heyman, they're looking to take over the WWE. They want total domination. They want to, have a stranglehold over the business and everything. So yeah, I understand the story that they're trying to tell, but Seth did not need Money in the Bank in order to achieve this. There would have been a different way to tell the story without Seth winning Money in the Bank. That's just my opinion. Some of you may disagree with me, but the majority of the people probably would agree with my viewpoint that LA Knight should have won this match. All right, now that brings us to the main event. Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso against John Cena and Logan Paul. This match went about 23 minutes and 45 seconds. Oh wait, I gotta go back. I forgot. I was so caught up in my rant about LA Knight that I forgot to give a rating for this match. So I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 rating. Like I said, pretty good Money in the Bank ladder match. Not great, but pretty good. All right, now back to the main event. So yeah, Cody and Jey against Cena and Logan. And this match kind of started off slow, slow pacing. But, it really started to pick up when Cena and Logan were starting to bicker with each other, because we've been seeing how this has been playing out over the last couple weeks on SmackDown. Logan and Cena having disagreements about certain things, and it gets to the point where they get in pissy matches with each other. And this is what happened here. They were getting a pissy match about, differing views on things. And Jey Uso was allowed to make the hot tag to Cody Rhodes, and they were like, oh shit, like, well, if you two would have stopped fucking bitching at each other, then that wouldn't have happened, so but yeah, it was really picking up. The guys were hitting their finishers left and right. Logan Paul had a pretty awesome looking spot. Jey Uso was on the announce table, and then Logan did that moonsault onto the announce table. And I have to give, Logan a lot of credit for pulling that off. Logan Paul, you can talk shit about Logan Paul. You don't have to like Logan Paul, but this dude can wrestle. He knows what he's doing in that ring. He can do some pretty cool looking stuff inside the wrestling ring. So yeah, you can bash Logan Paul until the cows come home, but when it comes to that squared circle, dude knows what he's doing. You have to give him credit for that. But when things were looking dire for Cody and Jey, Cena, looked like he was in control, and he did not anticipate what would happen next, as what appeared to be a random guy, wearing a black jacket and with the hood on and a mask, hopped the barricade and speared Cena and started, wailing on him. And then the guy takes off the hood and the mask, and it come to find out that it's R-Truth. Yes, R-Truth returns after being told that they were not going to renew his contract a week later. He returns, or a week earlier, I should say. But yeah, he returns to WWE here, and he hits Cena over the head with the WWE Championship. And then Cody Rhodes capitalizes on this and hits Crossroads, pins John Cena to become or to win the match. Yeah, not become champion. I feel like that's on the horizon, but not quite yet. But no, Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso win the match here thanks to R-Truth. And it was a good ending to send the crowd home happy. But yeah, I'm going to give this an overall rating of a 4 out of 5. We had some big names in this match, big spots, and a surprise ending with R-Truth coming out to help Cody and Jey. But yeah, man, R-Truth, I did not expect him to return here. I thought he was done, never coming back again to WWE. But man, wow. He made his presence felt. Ron R-Truth Killings is back in WWE. Crazy stuff, man. But yeah, so to recap my predictions here, to see what I got right. I predicted Naomi would win the women's Money in the Bank match, and I was correct. I correctly predicted Dominic to beat Octagon Jr. I correctly predicted Becky to beat Lyra Valkyria, and I was incorrect on the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. I predicted LA Knight would win, and Seth, got the victory. And then the main event, I predicted that Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso would win over Logan Paul and John Cena. So that gives me a correct match percentage of an 80%, as I got 4 out of the 5 matches correct. And as far as an overall rating for Money in the Bank goes, let's recap my ratings. The women's Money in the Bank ladder match got a 3 out of 5. Dominic versus Octagon Jr. got a 2.5 out of 5. Becky versus Lyra was a 3.5 out of 5. The men's Money in the Bank ladder match got a 3.5 out of 5. And the main event got a 4 out of 5 rating. So that gives you a average rating of a 3.3 on the 5-point scale. And as far as the overall rating goes, that'll give you a 6.6 out of 10 rating. So I'm going to round it up to a 7 out of 10. I don't do points, I round it up. So I'm going to give Money in the Bank a 7 out of 10 rating. I definitely think R-Truth showing up definitely helped, bring the rating of this pay-per-view up, because, it was kind of looking like a mid type of show for Money in the Bank up until the very end. So Money in the Bank gets a rating a 7 out of 10. It was a good show. Not great, but it was good. So yeah, my final rating is a 7 out of 10 for Money in the Bank. Overall, not a bad show. Could have been better, could have been worse. But yeah, that's my review of WWE Money in the Bank 2025. And stay tuned for other podcasts coming your way. I'm going to be doing a special podcast about R-Truth, Ron Killings' return to WWE, so stay tuned for that. And stay tuned, enjoy wrestling, and stay focused.